In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. His voice brought forth light, dividing day from night. Over 6 days, he shaped the universe, forming land, seas, and skies, creating all forms of life, and finally, humanity. The earth was teeming with creatures, from fish in the seas to birds in the sky and animals on land. Plants of all kinds flourished, creating a rich and vibrant world. God formed Adam from the dust, breathing life into him, making him the first man with a soul. Placing Adam in the Garden of Eden, God provided everything he needed: lush vegetation, flowing rivers, and trees bearing every kind of fruit. To relieve Adam's solitude, God created Eve from Adam's rib, making her his companion. They lived peacefully in Eden, with God granting them dominion over all creatures and instructing them not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Life in Eden was beautiful. In Eden, Adam and Eve knew no shame and lived without hardship. The garden was abundant, filled with incredible creatures that roamed freely. But when they were tempted by the serpent and ate from the forbidden tree, they were cast out of Eden, marking the beginning of human struggles. Banished from paradise, Adam and Eve began life in the world beyond the garden, working the land for sustenance. Adam and Eve had 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Abel became a shepherd, and Cain tilled the soil. They offered sacrifices to God, but only Abel's was accepted. In his jealousy and anger, Cain killed Abel, committing the first murder. As punishment, God marked Cain and exiled him. Cain went to Nod. The word Nod meant wandering or exile. Although there was no written evidence that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters, Cain was believed to have his lineage either with Adam and Eve's daughters or a niece. Cain's descendants continued his lineage. Cain fathered Enoch. The bloodline generation under Cain was Enoch, Irad, Methuselah, then Lamech. This Lamech was not associated with Lamech under the lineage of Seth. During those days, Cain germination established cities. And beginning the first human societies, Cain built and named his city Enoch for his son, but their ways often strayed from God's will. Cain's lineage died off and was not extended to Noah's days. During those days, which was called the Reptilian Age, Mesopotamia was one of the easiest regions where a complex and organized society was established, as the Garden of Eden was potentially in the vicinity of Mesopotamia. The name Mesopotamia means the land between rivers. The 2 rivers were the Tigris and the Euphrates, which is now modern-day Iraq, well as part of Syria, Turkey, and Kuwait. The generations from Cain. Cain's line began with Enoch, whom he fathered at an unknown age. Enoch fathered Irad, who continued the line through Mehujael, then Methuselah, and finally Lamech. Lamech, unlike his ancestors, had 2 wives, the first polygamist. His 2 wives were Adah and Zillah, and fathered Jabal, the ancestor of those who lived in tents and raised livestock, Jubal, the ancestor of musicians, and Tubal-Cain, who worked with metals. Cain's descendants developed culture, skills, and tools, but as humanity expanded, moral decline worsened. Cain's lineage, as mentioned, died off before Noah's days. Seth's lineage leading to Noah. Adam and Eve also had another son, Seth, through whom a separate lineage would lead to Noah. This line is recorded in greater detail, showing ages and lifespans. Adam lived 930 years and fathered Seth at age 130. Seth lived 912 years, fathering Enosh at age 105. Enosh lived 905 years, fathering Kenan at age 90. Kenan lived 910 years, fathering Mahalalel at age 70. Mahalalel lived 895 years, fathering Jared at age 65. Jared lived 962 years, fathering Enoch at age 162. Enoch lived 365 years, and it is said that he walked with God before God took him, suggesting he did not experience a natural death. Enoch fathered Methuselah at age 65. Methuselah lived 969 years, the longest recorded lifespan, fathering Lamech at age 187. Lamech lived 777 years, fathering Noah at age 182. Each generation from Adam to Noah exemplified long lifespans, with ages that far surpass modern lifespans. These long lives allowed knowledge, culture, and skills to develop, even as humankind often strayed from righteousness. The climate of early Earth is described as lush and misty, with no rain as we know it. Instead, a mist rose from the ground to water the land, creating an environment that supported large, powerful animals. It's thought that some of these creatures were vast, perhaps akin to the now extinct megafauna, which roamed an Earth that was still in a more stable, unaltered form compared to post-flood conditions. As Cain's and Seth's descendants multiplied, they developed skills, formed cities, and created societies. But sin spread, and God saw that human hearts were increasingly filled with violence and corruption. Though there were a few righteous individuals, like Enoch and Noah, humanity as a whole drifted from its original purpose. The world at this time has passed the first millennium, which is the first 1,600 years of Earth's life. God eventually chose to cleanse the earth to stop the corruption that had taken root. He instructed Noah, a righteous man, to build an ark large enough to house his family and pairs of every animal. Noah, his wife, and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, along with their wives, entered the ark with creatures of every kind. For 40 days, rain fell, covering the earth and ending the corrupted age. After the floodwaters receded, Noah's family emerged to a changed world. With the altered environment, rainfall, rainbow, and possibly clouds, the climate adapted to support a renewed earth. Noah lived another 350 years after the flood, fathering generations that would spread and repopulate the earth. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, each became the ancestors of different peoples and nations. Noah's life after the flood marked a fresh start, though the challenges of maintaining righteousness remained. The earth's landscape, climate, and society changed profoundly, setting the stage for the generations to follow. At the end of the second millennium, Noah died 350 years after the flood, which was known as the Reptilian Ages. The flood had drowned off most but all of these huge creatures. This gives a full view of creation from the Garden of Eden through the lineage, up to 2,600 years. The second and a half millennium in our timeline, as the third millennium was the start of a new age, and also an interesting time in our history. The biblical narrative and the archaeological understanding of early civilizations, focusing on key events, developments. Timeline from Noah to 3600 BCE. After the Great Flood, Noah and his family emerged to repopulate the earth. The descendants of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth spread across the globe, each establishing their own lineages and cultures. This timeline will trace the developments from the time of Noah to 3600 BCE, highlighting significant events and the rise of ancient civilizations. The post-flood era, circa 2350 to 2100 BCE, Noah and his family. Following the flood, Noah and his family settled in the region of Mesopotamia. According to biblical accounts, Noah lived for several hundred years, allowing his descendants to establish their roots. His sons became the forefathers of various peoples. Shem is traditionally considered the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, including the Israelites and Arabs. Ham is often associated with the peoples of Africa and the Near East, including the Egyptians. Japheth is believed to be the ancestor of various Indo-European groups. The Tower of Babel 2300 BCE. As humanity began to multiply, they spoke a single language and settled in the land of Shinar, which is also known as Mesopotamia. There, they decided to build a city and a tower reaching the heavens to make a name for themselves. In response, God confused their language, leading to the scattering of people across the earth. This event explains the diversity of languages and the origins of different nations. As the rise of early civilizations c. 2700 to 3100 BCE, the Sumerian civilization, 3100 BCE. In southern Mesopotamia, the Sumerians established one of the first known civilizations. They developed city-states. Each city-state, such as Uruk, and Lagash, had its own ruler and deity, and developed a cuneiform writing. Sumerians invented one of the earliest forms of writing, allowing for record-keeping and the administration of the city and states. The ziggurats developed massive temple complexes, served both religious and administrative functions, showcasing architectural advancements. During this time in Earth's history, the unification of Egypt in 3100 BCE. Around the same time, Egypt was emerging as a unified kingdom. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt by Narmer, as known as Menes, marked the beginning of the early dynastic period. Key developments included pharaohs. The rulers were considered divine and were responsible for maintaining order in the kingdom. As the development of hieroglyphs, the writing system developed to record religious texts and administrative details. The pyramids' early burial practices led to the construction of step pyramids, culminating in the famous pyramids of Giza in later centuries. The Old Kingdom of Egypt was already established from 2181 to 2686 BCE. During the Old Kingdom, the Egyptians saw the construction of the first true pyramids, like those at Giza. Key aspects include the After Noah's death around 1998 BC, the world entered a new era where civilizations flourished and humanity spread across the earth. During this time, major kingdoms and trade centers emerged, and important biblical events took place. Here's a breakdown. As the rise of civilizations. In the 2800 BC, the Bronze Age. By 2800 BC, many civilizations were advancing in technology and culture. The Bronze Age saw the development of tools, weapons, and the rise of major cities. Mesopotamia started in 900 BC. The land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers became one of the world's earliest cradles of civilization. They were destroyed in the flood of Noah. The Akkadian Empire rose 14 years after the flood, but by this time, other major powers like Babylon. The Assyria civilization started to form by 1975 BC, about 300 years after the flood. Babylon became an influential kingdom started in 2106 BC after the flood of Noah. It grew in power under kings like Hammurabi around 2116 BC, known for his famous law code in a matter of 10 years. Around the year 1762 BC, the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel, Genesis 11 verses 1-9, was built after the flood, as humanity attempted to create a city with a tower reaching the heavens. The Bible records that God confused their language, causing them to scatter across the earth. This event likely marked the end of a unified human society and the beginning of distinct nations and cultures. 2300 BC, the rise of Egypt. By 2300 BC, the ancient Egyptian civilization began to solidify its power along the Nile. Egypt's history includes the rise of monumental structures, like the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was built around 2560 to 2580 BC, which took 20 years to build. During the Fourth Dynasty, Pharaoh Khufu oversaw its construction. Egypt, though not directly mentioned in early biblical accounts, played a key role in later events like the story of Joseph and the Exodus. 2000 to 2400 BC, the Hittites and trade routes. The Hittite Empire emerged in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, around 1800 BC and became a major power by 2300 BC. They often clashed with Egypt over control of trade routes in the ancient world. After the flood, Noah's descendants spread across the earth. The Table of Nations in Genesis 10 provides an outline of the various peoples and tribes. Shem, Noah's son, became the father of the Semitic peoples, which would later include the Israelites, Assyrians, and others. Ham's descendants settled in Africa, including regions like Canaan, the land promised to Abraham's descendants, and Egypt. Japheth's descendants spread northward into Europe and Asia. By the time of Abraham, who was born around 1900 to 2000 BC, the Canaanite tribes had established themselves in the land of Canaan, which would later become central to the biblical narrative. The Seven Kingdoms and Babylon's influence. By 2200 BC, the seven kingdoms of the ancient world were rising, with Babylon being one of the key powers. These kingdoms included Akkad or Akkadian, established in the year 2154 to 2334 BC. This was one of the first empire organized with a central authority. Sumer or Sumerians didn't come around until the year 1750 BC in the region of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. They were innovative in the development of writing, cuneiform, and impressive architectural achievements. Their civilizations lasted over 2,350 years, leading to 4,100 BC. Their civilizations went through several phases, including the Ubaid period, the Uruk period, the early dynasty period, the Akkadian period, the Gutian period, and the UR111 period. Assyria Empire started in 375 BC, after Noah's flood, and ended in 2590 BC. The end of the Assyrian Empire was after the Battle of Haran. They were known as military power, administrative innovation, and cultural achievements. Babylon was established earlier in 1895 BC before fully developed by 2116. Elam civilization started around 2700 BC to 3200 BC during the time of ancient Egyptian, but were separate and distinct civilizations. The Elamite civilizations were centered in what is now southwest Iran, and ancient Egypt was located in the northeastern corner of Africa along the Nile River. Hittites' empire emerged in Anatolia, becoming a major player in the region in trade and conflict with neighboring states. The Egyptians and Hittites' clashes over trade routes and territory influenced the trade networks leading up to the third millennium. As civilizations expanded, so did trade networks linking regions like Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. Goods such as textile, metals, and grains were exchanged, fostering cultural interactions. Urartu started around 2,700 years, round about 900 years after the flood of Noah. They were also known as Van. They were a fantastic and influential culture that developed during the Bronze Age, primarily in the region that is now Armenia, eastern Turkey, and northwest Iran. They practices extensive agriculture, growing crops like wheat, barley, millet, rye, sesame, and flax. They were also known for viticulture and winemaking. They flourished for 270 years. Babylon played a major role in the ancient world, especially under King Hammurabi. The Hammurabi Code around 2246 BC was one of the earliest sets of laws in history, influencing governance across the region. Abraham, considered the father of the faithful, Genesis 12 verses 1-3, was born around 1900 to 2000 BC. God called Abraham to leave his homeland in Ur of the Chaldees, modern-day southern Iraq, and journey to Canaan, where God promised him land for his descendants. Abraham's faith and his covenant with God are foundational to the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Abraham's life spanned a period of significant historical change. His grandson, Jacob, would later be named Israel, and his descendants would form the 12 tribes of Israel. After Noah's death, around 1998, and other biblical events, humanity entered a new era, with civilizations rising across the earth. By 2800 BC, the Bronze Age flourished, marking advancements in technology and trade. In Mesopotamia, the Akkadians and Babylonians grew in power. By 2116 BC, Egypt's great monuments, including the Great Pyramid, stood tall. The Tower of Babel was built but was destroyed when God scattered humanity's language and nations. In Anatolia, the Hittites rose to power, clashing with Egypt over trade routes by 2400 BC. Around this time, Noah's descendants formed the tribes listed in Genesis 10, spreading out to Canaan, Egypt, and beyond. The seven kingdoms of the ancient world, including Babylon and Akkad, shaped history, while Abraham, born around 1900 to 2000 BC, traveled to Canaan as the father of the faithful. His descendants would later become the Israelites, marking a pivotal moment in biblical history. As the Middle Bronze Age from 2800 to 3600 BC was the start of a new age in our biblical timeline, significantly development has occurred. Civilizations such as Sumer and Egypt has established themselves, laying the groundwork for future cultures. The foundation of writing, governance, and organization was set, influences subsequent societies and shaping the course of human history. The period from Noah marks a critical time of human history, characterized by the emergence of complex societies, technology advancement, and the development of cultural practices that would endure for millennia. Understanding this timeline helped illuminate the connections between ancient civilizations and the legendary they left for future generations. The mystical stories about Atlantis within a closer timeline to Adam and Eve, situating it approximately 600 BC. But Plato wrote that Atlantis was about 9,000 years ago from his timeline, which would go against the biblical timeline of Adam and Eve. This ancient discrepancy often fuels debate, as the biblical timeline from Adam and Eve places humanity's origin at around 7,000 years ago. They created a powerful early civilization. This interpretation leans into a storytelling approach that fits within a biblical or myth-inspired framework. Atlantis is believed to have existed around the year 9400 BCE. In the biblical term BC, where does this date come from? Though it comes from the information provided in Plato's account of Atlantis as found in Critias. There, we find the narrative of Critias relating the story of Atlantis. Critias was almost certainly the poet and leader of Athens in the late 5th century BC. In the early years after the creation of Adam and Eve, as humanity began to spread across the earth, stories of great civilizations started to emerge. A remarkable kingdom arose, land that would one day become known in legend as Atlantis. Certainly, here's a concise description that includes an explanation of historical dating symbols. In ancient lore, the Atlanteans were believed to have lived between 600 and 1818 years after the time of Adam and Eve, rather than just a few centuries. Now here I will explain the timeline symbols. When discussing dates in history, you'll often see terms like BCE, BC, and AD. BCE, or before Common Era, BCE is used as a non-religious way to mark years before the birth of Christ. BC stands for before Christ, indicating the same time period before Christ's birth, but from a Christian perspective. After Christ's birth, we use AD, which stands for Anno Domini, meaning in the year of our Lord in Latin, marking the years from that point onward. Some may also use CE, which stands for Common Era, to indicate years in the same time frame as AD, but without religious context. Together, these symbols form a timeline that helps us understand the periods in which different cultures, such as the Atlanteans and even the Nephilims, are said to have thrived in myth and legend. Atlantis was a place of wonder and innovation, an advanced society blessed with natural beauty and abundant resources. Surrounded by fertile plains and vast oceans, the people of Atlantis built monumental structures, cultivated knowledge, and prospered in ways beyond what others of the time could imagine. They were skilled in arts, sciences, and governance, establishing a society whose achievements would be spoken of for centuries. However, as time passed, the people of Atlantis grew proud. The wisdom they had used to build their kingdom became overshadowed by a desire for power and control. Stories tell of how Atlantis eventually defied the laws of nature, changing stones into gold and other magical powers, animals that speak like the serpent in the Garden of Eden, challenging even the will of God. In their cultural lifestyles, they forgot the humility that had once guided their ancestors, drawing closer to their own downfall. Then, in a single day and night, catastrophe struck. The once great kingdom was swept beneath the waves, lost forever to the depths of the ocean. Some say this destruction was a divine judgment, a reminder to humanity of the dangers of pride and the importance of honoring creation. Though Atlantis was no more, its story would live on as a warning and as a mystery of a tale of early humanity's potential and its peril. It remains a powerful symbol, hinting at the forgotten ages that shaped the world even in those first centuries after Eden. This version keeps Atlantis within the early post-Edenic era, during the Reptilian Age, presenting it as an early, powerful society that quickly rose and fell. As the Nephilims was some fascinating and complex source of ancient history and also mythology, the Nephilims was recorded to exist after Adam and Eve, but they were destroyed during the Noah's flood, which took place 1,600 after the Garden of Eden. These varying accounts highlight the diverse ways ancient societies recorded time and events. The Nephilims appear in Genesis 6 verse 9, which described them as mighty men of old, men of renown. Their presence is mentioned before God decided to bring the great flood due to humanity's wickedness. The Nephilim thus precedes all of mankind, along with the huge reptiles of that era or timeline in Earth's history, was destroyed. The Nephilim's culture, their contributions like accounting principles, and how this relates to modern geography and their eventual end. From the Garden of Eden to the rise of the Nephilim. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The regions influenced by the Nephilim correspond to areas of ancient Mesopotamia, which is often called the cradle of civilization. This area, covering parts of Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, later became the birthplace of many foundational systems, including writing, mathematics, and governance. Their innovations in accounting and urban planning directly influenced later cultures like the Babylonians and Egyptians. The end of the Nephilim. By year 1530, the corruption of the Nephilim and their societies reached its peak. Their violence, exploitation, and defiance of God led to his judgment. In around the year 1535 BC, God instructed Noah to build an ark and warn of the coming flood. Noah took 120 years to build the ark. In year 1656, the flood destroyed the Nephilim and their civilizations, leaving only Noah, his family, and the animals aboard the ark. As noted in Genesis 7 verse 23, and every living substance was destroyed which was upon the face of the ground, including the huge reptilian animals, and of the sea and oceans, and Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. The Garden of Eden and humanity's beginning. The story begins in year 0, in the lush Garden of Eden. This paradise, described in Genesis 2 verses 8 to 14, was located near the meeting of 4 rivers, the Pison, Gihon, Hiddekel, Tigris, and Euphrates. Scholars often associate this area with the modern regions of the Middle East, near Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. After their disobedience, Adam and Eve were cast out of Eden, starting humanity's journey of survival. They labored to cultivate the ground and raise their family. Early descendants of Adam, such as Cain and Abel, established the first patterns of human culture, agriculture, animal husbandry, and city building. In Genesis 4 verse 17 mentions Cain building a city. The development of early civilization. By year 1000, the descendants of Adam had spread widely, forming early settlements and societies. Among these were the Nephilim, described in Genesis 6 verse 1 to 4 as mighty men of renown. They were likely located in regions corresponding to modern-day Mesopotamia, North Africa, and parts of the Mediterranean. The Nephilim were distinct in their physical strength, intellect, and influence. As early leaders and innovators, they shaped many aspects of pre-flood civilization. Architectural feats. The Nephilim's advanced understanding of engineering allowed for the construction of monumental structures, including walled cities and ziggurat-like temples. These early forms of architecture may have inspired later wonders, such as Egypt's pyramids or Mesopotamia's ziggurats. During this time, the Nephilims created accounting principles which is still used in our modern world today. To manage resources and labor, the Nephilim and their societies developed early accounting systems. Using clay tablets, they recorded transactions, managed inventories, and tracked food supplies. These systems laid the foundation for modern bookkeeping and are reflected in the ancient practices of Mesopotamian cuneiform accounting, which evolved into double-entry bookkeeping still used today. Their society hierarchies structured with kings or rulers at the top, supported by skilled artisans, farmers, and laborers. However, the Nephilim were also tyrannical, dominating weaker populations and contributing to widespread violence and oppression. In deep spiritual corruption, despite their achievements, the Nephilim were deeply immoral. They defied God, exploited humanity, and propagated a culture of excess and idolatry. Their actions exemplified the growing wickedness on earth, as stated in Genesis 6 verse 5. Important biblical events from the time of Abraham, leading up to approximately 4 years before the birth of Christ. Abraham 2000 BC. Abraham, originally named Abram, is called by God to leave his homeland and journey to a land that God would show him. God promises to make him the father of a great nation. Genesis 12 verses 1 to 3. Abram, at 75 years old, obeys God's command and travels with his wife Sarai, later Sarah, and his nephew Lot, into the land of Canaan. God establishes a covenant with Abraham, promising him that his descendants will inherit the land and become as numerous as the stars. Genesis 17 verses 4 to 5. God changes Abram's name to Abraham and Sarai's name to Sarah. Genesis 17 verses 5 to 15. The birth of Isaac to Abraham and Sarah in their old age. Genesis 21 verses 1 to 7. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah due to their wickedness. Genesis 19 verses 24 to 25. Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac as a test of faith. Genesis 22 verses 1 to 18. Isaac and Jacob 2100 BC. Isaac, the promised son of Abraham and Sarah, marries Rebekah, and they have 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau, the elder, sells his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of stew, and Jacob later deceives Isaac into giving him the blessing meant for Esau. Genesis 25 verses 29 to 34. Jacob flees to his uncle Laban, where he marries Leah and Rachel, and has 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel. Genesis 29 verses 15 to 30. Jacob wrestles with God and is given the name Israel. Genesis 32 verses 22 to 30. The 12 sons of Jacob, including Joseph, who would later become a ruler in Egypt. Genesis 37 verses 1 to 36. Joseph and the Exodus 2300 BC. Joseph, one of Jacob's sons, is sold into slavery by his jealous brothers and taken to Egypt. Through a series of events, Joseph rises to power in Egypt, eventually saving his family from famine. The Israelites settled in Egypt, but over time, they became enslaved. Genesis 41 verses 46 to 57, Exodus 1 verses 8 to 14. The Israelites' enslavement in Egypt. Exodus 1 verses 8 to 14. God calls Moses from the burning bush to deliver the Israelites. Exodus 3 verses 1 to 12. Moses confronts Pharaoh, leading to the 10 plagues. Exodus 7 to 12. The Israelites are freed from slavery and cross the Red Sea. Exodus 14. Moses and the giving of the law. 2700 BC, dated from Adam and Eve, coming up to the birth of Jesus Christ in the 4th year of the 4th millennium. Moses leads the Israelites through the wilderness toward the Promised Land. On Mount Sinai, God gives Moses the 10 Commandments and other laws to guide the people. Exodus 19 to 20. Moses spent 40 years leading the Israelites through the desert, teaching them God's laws and preparing them to enter the Promised Land. The golden calf incident, when the Israelites worship a false god. Exodus 32. Moses' striking of the rock to bring forth water. Numbers 20 verses 1 to 13. Moses' death before entering the Promised Land. Deuteronomy 34 verses 5 to 12. The conquest of Canaan. 2700 to 2800 BC. Under the leadership of Joshua, Moses' successor, the Israelites conquer the land of Canaan, as God had promised to Abraham. Joshua 1 verses 1 to 9. The walls of Jericho fall after the Israelites march around them for 7 days. Joshua 6. The division of the land among the 12 tribes of Israel. Joshua 13 to 21. The establishment of the covenant renewal at Shechem. Joshua 24 verses 1-28. The period of Judges 2800 to 3000 BC in the third millennium. After the conquest, the Israelites ruled by a series of judges, leaders raised by God to deliver the people from their enemies. This period is marked by cycles of sin, oppression, repentance, and deliverance. Key judges include Deborah, Gideon, and Samson. The defeat of the Midianites by Gideon. Judges 7. The story of Samson and Delilah, culminating in Samson's death. Judges 13 to 16. The United Kingdom of Israel. 3000 BC. The people of Israel, desiring a king to be like other nations, anoint Saul as their first king. 1 Samuel 8. Saul's reign is marked by initial success but later failure, leading to his rejection by God. 1 Samuel 15. David, a young shepherd, is chosen by God to succeed Saul and unites the tribes of Israel. David's defeat of Goliath. 1 Samuel 17. David's reign and establishment of Jerusalem as the capital. 2 Samuel 5 verses 6 to 10. The sin of David with Bathsheba and the consequences that follow. The kingdom divided the year 3070 BC. After Solomon's death, the kingdom of Israel splits into two: the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. The kingdom of Israel is led by Jeroboam, and the kingdom of Judah is led by Rehoboam, Solomon's son. The division was result of a series of wicked kings in Israel, leading to the eventual conquest by the Assyrians. The construction of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. 1 Kings 6 to 7. The division of the kingdom. 1 Kings 12. The Assyrian conquest of Israel. 2 Kings 17 verses 1-23. The Babylonian exile. 3414 BC. The kingdom of Judah eventually falls to the Babylonians after a series of invasions. The temple in Jerusalem is destroyed, and many Israelites are exiled to Babylon. This period is marked by the prophecies of Jeremiah and the ministry of Daniel in Babylon. The destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. 2 Kings 25. The exile of the Israelites to Babylon. 2 Kings 24 verses 10 to 16. The prophetic writings of Daniel, Ezekiel, and others during the exile. Return from exile and the restoration of the temple in the year 3462 BC. After 70 years of exile, the Persian king Cyrus allows the Israelites to return to their land. They rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, which is completed under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Ezra. The return of the exiles under Zerubbabel. Ezra 1, verses 1 to 11. The rebuilding of the temple. Ezra 3, and the Maccabean revolt in the year 3834 to 3840 BC. Under the rule of the Seleucid king Antiochus IV, the Jews face persecution and the temple is defiled. The Maccabean revolt leads to the rededication of the temple and the establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty. The rededication of the temples. 1 Maccabees 4 verses 36 to 59. The rise of the Hasmonean dynasty and Jewish independence. The Roman Empire and the birth of Jesus Christ in the year 4004 BC. In the 1st century BC, Judea falls under Roman control. Herod the Great rules as king of Judea, and the Romans govern the region. It is during this time that Jesus Christ is born in Bethlehem, fulfilling the prophecies of the Old Testament. His birth marks the beginning of a new era in our history. The birth of Jesus Christ in Bethlehem in Matthew 1 verses 18 to 25 and Luke 2 verses 1-7. The visit of the wise men in Matthew 2 verses 1 to 12. The flight into Egypt to escape King Herod's decree also found in Matthew 2. This marks the period leading up to the life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, which are foundational to Christianity. In the first century to our year 2001 present time. Welcome to our first century that leads up to our present day. Let clear a bit of confusion arises with the correct date in our first century during the birth of Jesus Christ. Because the widely used Anno Domini AD system, introduced by the monk Dionysius Exiguus in the 6th century, contains inconsistencies. So let me clarify. Creation of the year 1 AD system in the 4 millennium. Dionysius calculated that Jesus was born in the year 1 AD. However, modern historians and biblical scholars have found that Jesus was likely born several years earlier, around 4 to 6 BC, at the beginning of the 4th millennium, due to historical evidence such as the death of King Herod, who died in 4 year BC in our 4th millennium. If Jesus was born in 4 to 6 year BC and lived approximately 33 years, his death would fall around AD 37 to 39 AD. This aligns with the historical time frame of events like Pentecost and the early Christian church's growth. Discrepancy with the creation date of 4004 BC. The 4004 BC date for creation comes from James Ussher, a 17th century Archbishop of Armagh. He calculated this date based on genealogies in the Bible. This is unrelated to the AD-BC system and reflects a theological interpretation rather than historical evidence. If we assume Ussher's timeline of 4004 BC as creation and calculate Jesus' birth around 4 to 6 BC, there is no inherent conflict. However, the Anno Domini dating system was a later invention and does not account for Ussher's theological calculations. The AD-BC dating system is separate from Ussher's timeline. The key is that AD-1 was miscalculated by a few years. Historical records like Herod's death support Jesus' birth closer to 4 to 6 BC, making his death around AD 37 to 39 consistent with history. Life in Greece in the 1st century. A glimpse of life and the spread of Christ's birth. Imagine yourself in ancient Greece, around the time when Jesus was born, roughly between 4 and 6 BC in the 4th millennium. The streets of Athens, Corinth, and other bustling cities were alive with trade, philosophy, and culture. The Greek people, who had long been absorbed into the Roman Empire, still held on to their ancient traditions and ideas, and these shaped their daily lives. Life in Greece was a blend of tradition and Roman influence. Now imagine you're resident of one of the Greek cities in that time, which was a part of the vast Roman Empire. The grandeur of the Roman Empire is evident everywhere. In the monumental buildings, the Roman baths, and the well-maintained roads that stretch across the land. Though Greek culture and language still dominate in many parts, the presence of Roman soldiers and officials is a daily reminder of your status as a subject of Rome. Your life might revolve around one of the great city-states like Athens, which remains a center of learning, or Corinth, a city thriving with trade and commerce. You might live in a modest home made of stone, or if you're lucky, in a villa if you're from a wealthier family. People gather in the agora, the central marketplace, to discuss philosophy, politics, and religion. The teachings of famous philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle still echo in the public discourse. Your diet consists of olives, bread, fish, wine, and vegetables, with occasional meat feasts for special occasions. You may visit the public baths, a place for both cleaning and socializing. You worship the gods of ancient Greece, Zeus, Athena, Apollo, but the influence of Roman deities is becoming more prominent. The emperor himself, often considered divine, holds a sacred position, and you might find yourself occasionally participating in Roman-style sacrifices and ceremonies. Religion and the Roman Empire's influence. The Roman Empire's influence extends to your beliefs, and you might find yourself caught between traditional Greek polytheism and the emerging Roman religious practices. There is growing tension, especially in the eastern provinces like Judea, where a new faith is beginning to take root. You've heard whispers of a strange man from the east who was born under mysterious circumstances, a man who claims to be the Messiah of the Jewish people. His followers speak of miracles and teachings that go against the grain of established beliefs. While many Greeks remain devoted to their gods, the idea of a divine man who offers a new way of salvation intrigues some. The notion that a single god, rather than a pantheon of gods, can bring salvation is revolutionary, even in a society where philosophy often sought the nature of the divine. The words of this new faith, centered around a man named Jesus, begin to spread quietly across the Roman Empire, reaching even the farthest provinces, including Greece. The birth of Christ and how the news spread. One cold winter night in 4 BC, the world was unknowingly changing. A child was born in a humble manger in Bethlehem, far to the east, in the land of Judea. The world didn't know it yet, but this was the birth of Jesus Christ, whose life would alter the course of history. However, at the time of his birth, Greece and the rest of the Roman Empire were still unaware of the significance. Word of Christ's birth spread gradually, like a ripple across the waters. At first, only a few would have heard of it: a small group of shepherds, some distant travelers, and the wise men who followed a star to witness the newborn child. For most in Greece, this was just another story among the many that traveled the empire. Stories of miraculous births were not unheard of, and while some may have taken interest, others dismissed it as just one more tale from the far-flung corners of the empire. As the years passed, the teachings of Jesus spread beyond Judea, carried by travelers and traders who journeyed the Roman roads. Greek was the common language of the Eastern Roman Empire, and the ideas surrounding this new movement began to take root among Greek-speaking populations. Early Christians, many of whom were Jewish, began to spread the message of this new Savior, proclaiming that the Messiah had come and that salvation was available. Some Greeks would have heard the news in marketplaces or in the crowded public forums. The ideas of this new religion may have sounded strange to many. A God who became human, died for the sins of the world, and then rose from the dead. But for others, these teachings offered something profound: hope in a world filled with Roman rule, unrest, and uncertainty. Philosophers, always seeking new ideas, might have taken notice, intrigued by the new concept of divine love and redemption. How did the Greeks react to the news of Christ's birth and the early teachings of Christianity? Indifference and curiosity. For many Greeks, life was already rich with religion, philosophy, and tradition. The birth of a child in a distant land didn't seem to disrupt their lives significantly. However, those who were open to new ideas might have found the stories of Christ intriguing, especially those that promised eternal life and a new way of relating to the divine. The notion of a God who suffered and died for humanity was unfamiliar, but to some, it offered a new way of thinking about the divine that resonated with their philosophical inquiries. Opposition. For others, particularly the ruling classes or those loyal to the Roman system, the spread of Christianity was a threat. The Romans had their own pantheon of gods and emperor worship, and any movement that questioned these beliefs was seen as dangerous. The idea of one God, especially one that was not a part of Roman religion, was radical. Early Christians, including those in Greece, faced persecution. Followers and converts, despite the opposition, many Greeks began to convert to Christianity, drawn by its message of love, equality, and salvation. Christianity offered a sense of community and belonging, transcending the rigid hierarchies of Roman society. Those who suffered in the empire, slaves, women, and the poor, found comfort in the idea that they too were loved by this one true God. As the years passed, the teachings of Christ spread across the Roman Empire, from the Greek-speaking regions of Asia Minor to the cities of Rome itself. It would take centuries, but eventually Christianity would become the dominant faith in the empire, changing the course of history. Here is a glimpse of life in Greece during this time. You might find yourself walking along the busy streets of Athens, where philosophers continue to debate the nature of reality and the gods. In the corner of your mind, you might hear rumors of a new teacher from the East, Jesus, whose birth and life have become the talk of some circles. You might overhear the conversations in the agora, where people debate whether this new belief system could be the key to a better life, or whether it is simply a passing fad. The birth of Christ and the rise of Christianity are distant events for many, but their ripples would soon be felt in the very heart of the Roman Empire, changing the way the world viewed life, death, and the divine. In this world of ancient Greece, the seeds of a new faith are being planted, and though you might not fully understand it yet, the future of the empire and the world will soon be shaped by this story of a humble birth in a faraway land. Jesus Christ. During this time in the 1st century, let's take a look on how life was like in different parts of the world, especially in Greece, Germany, England, and the regions around Rome. Additionally, understanding the fall of the Roman Empire and the environmental and cultural context of that era. Here's what life was like in those regions in the 1st century during and after the death of Christ. Greece. Culture and society. Greece in the 1st century was part of the Roman Empire, but it still retained much of its rich cultural heritage. Philosophers, scientists, and scholars from ancient Greece, such as Plato and Aristotle, influenced Western thought. Athens remained a center of learning and art. Greek was widely spoken across the Eastern Roman Empire, and many aspects of Greek culture, such as the Olympic Games and architectural styles like columns, remained influential. The daily life was structured around city-states, but under Roman rule, Greece had more autonomy than other parts of the empire. People lived in small homes, often with limited access to running water or sanitation. Food was simple, and staple diets included bread, olives, fruits, and fish. Public baths and theaters were important in daily life. There was also a strong focus on religion, with gods like Zeus and Apollo worshipped, although Roman deities increasingly took precedence. Germany during this time. In the 1st century, Germany, then referred to as Germania, was not yet a unified nation but was inhabited by various Germanic tribes. These tribes were known for their warrior culture and resistance to Roman expansion. They had a strong oral tradition, with stories passed down through generations. The Roman influence. The Roman Empire expanded into Germania but faced strong opposition. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD was a significant event when Germanic tribes, led by Arminius, defeated 3 Roman legions, halting Roman expansion into Germania, as life in Germania was centered around agricultural communities. The tribes lived in wooden houses, and their economy was based on farming, hunting, and animal husbandry. Religion was animistic, and they worshipped nature spirits. During that time, England was known Britannia. Roman Britain in the 1st century, Britain was part of the Roman Empire after Emperor Claudius' conquest in 43 AD. Roman rule brought infrastructure, including roads, Hadrian's Wall built around 122 AD, and Roman-style villas and baths. London, then was called Londinium, became an important Roman city. Daily life for most Britons was rural, with people living in small villages and farming. The Romans introduced new crops, techniques, and better infrastructure, though Celtic traditions remained strong. Religion was a blend of Roman gods and Celtic deities. The Romans built towns and military forts, and trade flourished in Roman Britain, with goods imported from across the empire. The end of Roman Empire. The Roman Empire. Rome was the center of the known world at the time of Jesus' birth. The empire controlled vast territories from the British Isles to the Middle East, and its economy was largely based on agriculture, trade, and military conquest. Roman law, architecture, and engineering had a profound influence on the ancient world. Social classes were strictly defined, and the rich lived in grand homes while the poor often lived in crowded apartment buildings. As the fall of the Roman Empire began to decline in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD due to internal struggles, economic instability, and invasions by barbarian tribes, example Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns. The Western Roman Empire officially fell in 476 AD, when the last Roman emperor was overthrown by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. The Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued for nearly another 1,000 years until the fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD, close to the time of Christopher Columbus reaching to the Caribbean in 1494. During this time, Persia-Parthian Empire to the east of the Roman Empire, the Parthians controlled a large empire that stretched from modern-day Iran to Iraq. The Parthians were in frequent conflict with Rome over territory in the Near East. Egypt. Under Roman rule, Egypt was an important province known for its grain production, which fed much of the Roman Empire. Alexandria was a center of learning, commerce, and culture. Egyptians continued to practice their ancient religion, although there was growing influence from Roman gods. At the time, Judea. During the 1st century, Judea was a Roman province with a tense relationship between the Roman authorities and the Jewish population. It was the birthplace of Jesus Christ, and his life and teachings played a central role in the cultural and religious context of the time. Roman infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, and architectural achievements like the Colosseum and the Pantheon influenced much of Europe and beyond. As cultural exchange, the Silk Road facilitated trade between the Roman Empire and China, bringing luxury goods such as silk, spices, and other exotic items to Rome. Christianity began to spread in the 1st century, particularly after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Roman polytheism began to wane, and new religious movements, including Christianity, gained followers. The climate during the 1st century was somewhat temperate, with relatively stable weather patterns across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. However, the environment was harsher in northern regions like Germany and Britain. Deforestation in certain areas was prevalent, and agriculture was heavily dependent on seasonal weather patterns. Now we will take a look in history covering the 1st century to the 10th century, then a leap to the 5th millennium, highlighting major events, cultural shifts, great painters, and the tribes of South America and the Caribbean with connections to ancient civilizations. From the 1st century to the 10th century. 1st century 100 AD, after the death of Jesus Christ. Roman Empire. The height of Roman power under emperors like Augustus and Nero. Rome's influence spans Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Birth of Christ. Christianity begins in the Roman province of Judea, spreading across the empire through apostles like Peter and Paul. Cultural contributions in Roman engineering thrives, example aqueducts, roads. Writers like Seneca and Pliny the Elder document life in the empire. 2nd century 100 to 200 AD. Pax Romana. A period of peace and stability in the Roman Empire. Spread of Christianity. Persecutions occur, but the faith gains followers across the empire. Advancements. Ptolemy develops astronomical theories. Galen advances medicine. 3rd century 200 to 300 AD. Crisis of the 3rd century. Political instability and invasions shake the Roman Empire. As the rise of Christianity, despite being outlawed, the religion grows rapidly. Tribal movements during this time. The Germanic tribes like the Goths begin migrating southward, pressuring the empire. During the 4th century, 300 to 400 AD, Christianity legalized. Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity in 313 AD, and it becomes the empire's dominant religion. Division of the empire. The Roman Empire splits into Western and Eastern halves by 395 AD. Cultural flourishing during time. Early Christian art emerges, combining Roman and religious themes. The 5th century 400 to 500 AD. During this time, fall of the Western Roman Empire. In 476 AD, the last Roman emperor is deposed, marking the fall of Rome. Then came the rise of barbarian kingdoms. Tribes like the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, and Vandals established kingdoms in former Roman territories. During this time, the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople, thrives and preserves Roman traditions. 6th century 500 to 600 AD. Justinian's rule. The Byzantine emperor attempts to reunite the Roman Empire, builds the Hagia Sophia. Spread of monasticism. Monasteries preserve knowledge and foster learning in Europe. While on the other side of the world, Mesoamerica, the Mayan civilization flourishes, constructing cities like Tikal and Chichen Itza. In the 7th century 600 to 700 AD, Islam emerges. The Prophet Muhammad establishes Islam in the Arabian Peninsula, rapidly spreading to North Africa and the Middle East. Anglo-Saxon England. Kingdoms like Mercia and Wessex grow in power. Trade routes expand. The Silk Road facilitates exchanges between Europe, Asia, and Africa. During the 8th century 700 to 800 AD, Charlemagne, king of the Franks, crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD, unites much of Western Europe. During this time, the Viking raids, Scandinavian seafarers begin raiding and settling in Europe. Mesoamerican art. The Mayan civilization reaches its peak, producing intricate carvings and advanced astronomical knowledge. In 9th century 800 to 900 AD, Byzantine Golden Age, advances in art, science, and theology in the Eastern Empire. Rise of feudalism. The system of lords and vassals begins shaping medieval Europe. Pre-Columbian South America, cultures like the Nazca and Moche flourish, leaving behind art and geoglyphs. As time coming from creation, Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, we approach the 5th millennium. 10th century 900 to 1000 AD. Formation of nations. England and France begin to take shape as unified states. Viking settlements. Norse settlers establish colonies in Iceland and Greenland. Andean cultures, the Wari and Tiwanaku civilizations, dominate the Andes. The 5th millennium from 3000 to 4000 BC to now 5000 AD. This period predates written history but saw significant developments. Civilizations begin. The Sumerians in Mesopotamia build the first cities. Agriculture spreads. Farming communities emerge worldwide, including the Americas. Mesoamerican cultures. Proto-Olmec societies lay the groundwork for future civilizations. During this time, great painters and artists. Byzantine era. Artists like Andrei Rublev create stunning religious icons. Renaissance precursors. Artists of illuminated manuscripts preserve knowledge and inspire later painters. Tribes of South America and the Caribbean during the 10th century or the 5th millennium. Moche and Nazca, known for pottery, textiles, and the famous Nazca lines. Amazonian tribes. Early cultures in the Amazon practiced sustainable farming and had vast trade networks. Caribbean islands. Taino or Arawak Indians dominated the Caribbean islands, practicing agriculture and fishing. The Carib, fierce warriors and skilled seafarers, influencing navigation in the region. The Taino and South American origins. The Taino descended from Arawakan peoples who migrated from South America. By the 12th century, the Caribs dominated much of the Caribbean, including islands such as Dominica, St. Vincent, and Grenada. Known for their seafaring skills and warlike tendencies, they were skilled canoe builders and navigators. The Caribs often raided the Arawak tribes, who were more peaceful and lived primarily on agriculture and fishing. Their society was deeply rooted in oral traditions and spirituality, with shamans playing an essential role in their belief systems. The Amazon basin was home to diverse tribes such as the Yanomami, Tupi, and Kayapo. These tribes thrived in the lush rainforests, utilizing the land for hunting, fishing, and cultivating crops like manioc and maize. They developed sustainable agricultural practices, including slash and burn farming, and were experts in using plants for medicinal purposes. Meanwhile, in the Andes, civilizations such as the Inca were advancing in architecture, governance, and astronomy, laying the groundwork for their empire. During this time, in North America, tribes such as the Iroquois Confederacy, Cherokee, and Sioux lived in harmony with the land. The Iroquois developed complex political systems, while Plains tribes like the Sioux followed bison migrations. The ancestral Puebloans Anasazi in the Southwest built sophisticated cliff dwellings and irrigation systems. Spirituality and storytelling were central to their cultures, connecting them deeply to the land. Storytelling was also brought in the Caribbean region until the invention of the television. In 1484, Christopher Columbus, under the sponsorship of Spain, sought a new route to Asia. In 1492, his fleet La Nina, La Pinta, and Santa Maria landed in the Caribbean, mistaking it for India. When Columbus arrived in Jamaica in 1494, he encountered the Taínos, a subgroup of the Arawak people. The Taínos who lived in organized villages. Now let's take a brief time when counties has their names changed. Spain, known as Hispania during the Roman Empire, its name evolved into España, Spain, as Latin influenced the region. England, referred to as Londinium under Roman rule, the name transitioned to England derived from the Angles, a Germanic tribe, by the 10th century. The pirates of the Caribbean and British takeover. By the 17th century, pirates such as Henry Morgan and Blackbeard roamed the Caribbean, preying on Spanish treasure fleets. In 1655, Britain seized Jamaica from Spain, establishing it as a key colony. British governance in the Caribbean centralized trade and agriculture, but the system heavily relied on enslaved African labor. The slave trade was abolition. The transatlantic slave trade ended officially in 1807 in Britain and in 1808 in the US, though slavery itself continued until the mid-19th century. The Caribbean's economy began transitioning from slaverito systems of indentured labor, introducing workers from India and China. During the 18th century North America, cowboys and Indians. The 18th century in North America saw westward expansion, leading to conflicts between settlers cowboys and Native American tribes. These clashes were fueled by land disputes, resource competition, and differing worldviews. As the 19th century approaches, the World Wars and modern inventions. World Wars. The 20th century saw two global conflicts. World War II 1939 to 1945 ended with the development of the atomic bomb, changing the nature of warfare. During this time, inventions slowly started to create a new chapter of humanity. Electric power revolutionized industries and daily life. Automotive industry mass production, pioneered by Henry Ford, transformed transportation. Computers and satellites laid the foundation for modern communication and space exploration. As the story from Adam to now. From Adam, considered the first human in the biblical tradition, humanity expanded across the earth. By the 5th millennium, civilizations flourished, contributing to culture, technology, and governance. Population growth surged during the Industrial Revolution and continues today, reaching over 8 billion in modern time. As the world grew in expansion tradition and the old ways of life faded, and bring forth a new generation, a generation with less spiritual connection and more to the conversation about modern ways of life. As the world now moves into a series of changes in weather patterns around the world, weather patterns have shifted dramatically due to industrialization and climate change. Phenomena like rising global temperatures, hurricanes, and droughts affect agriculture and ecosystems. Population density has led to urbanization, with cities becoming hubs of innovation and resilience. In modern times, increased education levels and a faster world contributed to a time of hardship for millions and the constant struggles of daily lives. As the days of lords and pharaohs are now taken over by prime ministers and presidents, globalization, trade, and technology connected the world, creating interdependent economies and cultures. Climate change, environmental concerns became a major global issue. Technological innovations, smartphones, artificial intelligence, and renewable energy have reshaped daily life. Global challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted global health vulnerabilities, while geopolitical tensions remain high. Finishing where we are today, 2024. We live in a world shaped by centuries of progress, conflict, and innovation. Modern society is defined by technological interconnectedness, cultural diversity, and ongoing challenges like climate change and inequality. While humanity has achieved incredible advancements, the need for understanding, sustainability, and unity remains essential. From Adam and Eve to today, our story is one of resilience, creativity, and the constant pursuit of a better future. 2024 to 2050. Renewable energy transition, solar, wind, and nuclear power will dominate energy grids, phasing out fossil fuels. Geoengineering. Techniques like cloud seeding, carbon capture, and solar reflectors may mitigate global warming. Global climate agreements. Stricter global cooperation to limit temperature rise to below 1.5 degrees Celsius will shape international relations. Climate refugees, rising sea levels, and extreme weather events may displace millions, demanding global humanitarian responses. 2051 to 2100. Planet restoration. Advances in biotechnology could enable reforestation, ocean health recovery, and the reintroduction of extinct species. Sustainable cities. Urban centers will become eco-friendly with vertical farms, green architecture, and advanced water recycling systems. Weather control. Precise control over weather patterns could reduce disasters like hurricanes and droughts. Climate equity. As technology progresses, previously vulnerable regions could access the tools needed to thrive in changing climates. Unexpected possibilities. While some trends are predictable, others may arise from humanity's creativity or challenges we cannot yet foresee. Cultural and societal evolution. Global unity or fragmentation. AI and automation might lead to new economic systems where wealth is redefined, possibly eliminating poverty altogether. New religions and philosophies. As humans extend lifespans and explore the stars, spiritual and philosophical systems will evolve to address the meaning of existence in a vastly changed universe. Human potential and beyond. Genetic enhancements. CRISPR and similar technologies could allow humans to modify their genes for intelligence, health, and even appearance, creating a new era of designer humans. Artificial ecosystems. Space and earthbound biodomes may allow humanity to create controlled ecosystems for survival in extreme conditions. Extraterrestrial integration. If alien life is discovered, it may lead to partnerships, conflicts, or philosophical shifts about humanity's place in the cosmos. The journey continues. The 21st century represents a crossroads. With the tools to address existential threats and unlock incredible opportunities, humanity's future could be one of unity and prosperity or conflict and division. Whether colonizing other planets, merging with machines, or achieving climate stability, the choices made now will ripple through the centuries to come. Here is a quick view with technology what may transpire from 2024 to 2100. Technology and artificial intelligence (AI). The evolution of technology will likely define the 21st century as much as industrialization defined the 19th. AI will become deeply integrated into every aspect of human life. 2024 to 2050. Ubiquitous AI assistants. Virtual personal assistants will manage daily tasks, education, and even personal relationships. Automation and employment. Entire industries, from manufacturing to healthcare, will be run by AI-driven systems, reshaping job markets and potentially leading to universal basic income models. Brain-computer interfaces. Companies like Neuralink may enable direct communication between the human brain and machines, merging human thought with digital capabilities. AI ethics and governance. A global regulatory framework will likely emerge to address AI misuse, bias, and its impact on privacy and human rights. 2051 to 2100. Sentient AI. AI systems may develop levels of consciousness, raising profound ethical and philosophical questions about coexistence and rights. Post-human cyborgs with advanced prosthetics, implants, and enhancements. The distinction between human and machine could blur, creating post-human individuals. AI-created art and culture. AI could become a creative force, contributing new forms of art, music, and literature that challenge human perspectives. Space exploration. Space exploration is expected to expand humanity's horizons and establish a permanent presence beyond Earth. 2024 to 2050. Return to the Moon. Lunar bases will become hubs for research, mining, and as stepping stones to Mars. Mars colonization. Human settlements on Mars will focus on self-sufficiency, terraforming research, and understanding how to live off-planet. Space tourism. Private companies will offer suborbital and orbital trips, making space accessible to more people. Asteroid mining. Resources from asteroids, like rare metals and water, could transform Earth's economy and reduce resource conflicts. 2051 to 2100. Interplanetary civilization. Regular travel between Earth, Mars, and possibly other celestial bodies like the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Search for extraterrestrial life. Advanced telescopes and probes could confirm life in oceans beneath Europa's ice or in the atmospheres of distant exoplanets. Deep space exploration. Human missions to the outer solar system and beyond may begin, using advanced propulsion systems like nuclear or even warp drives. Space habitats. Massive space stations, potentially housing millions, could orbit Earth and other planets, creating new nations in space. Climate and environmental changes. Climate will remain one of humanity's greatest challenges and opportunities for innovation. A quick review. From Adam and Eve to the 10th century. The story begins with Adam and Eve, humanity's first parents, in the biblical Garden of Eden. As they were exiled, humanity spread and developed early civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. Over time, empires rose and fell, from Babylon to Rome, and religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam shaped human societies. By the 10th century, the medieval world was dominated by feudal systems in Europe, flourishing Islamic empires, and vibrant civilizations in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. From the 10th century to 2024, the path to the modern world. 11th to 15th centuries, the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Crusades 1095 to 1291. A series of religious wars between Christians and Muslims reshaped Europe and the Middle East. Mongol Empire 13th century. Genghis Khan created the largest contiguous empire, connecting East and West. Black Death 1347 to 1351. A devastating plague killed millions, altering Europe's economy and society. Renaissance 14th to 15th centuries. A rebirth of art, science, and culture in Europe, driven by figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. 16th to 18th centuries. The age of exploration and enlightenment. European exploration. Christopher Columbus 1492 reached the Americas, followed by other explorers who connected the world through trade and colonization. Protestant Reformation 1517. Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church, leading to religious and political upheavals. Scientific Revolution 16th to 17th centuries. Figures like Galileo and Isaac Newton transformed our understanding of the universe. Colonial empires. Spain, Portugal, England, and France established vast empires in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. 19th century. Industrial Revolution and social change. Industrial Revolution, steam engines, factories, and railroads revolutionized production and transportation. Abolition of slavery. Movements in Europe and the Americas led to the abolition of slavery. Rise of nationalism. Revolutions reshaped nations, from the French Revolution 1789 to the unification of Italy and Germany. Advancements in science. Darwin's theory of evolution and innovations in medicine and technology transformed societies. 20th century. War, technology, and globalization. World wars. World War I 1914 to 1918 redrew borders and ended empires like the Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian. World War II 1939 to 1945 led to the rise of the US and Soviet Union as superpowers and the establishment of the United Nations. Decolonization. Former colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean gained independence post-World War II. Cold War 1947 to 1991. A global ideological struggle between capitalism led by the US and communism led by the Soviet Union. Technological revolution. The invention of computers, the internet, and space exploration transformed human life. Social movements. Civil rights, women's rights, and environmental movements reshaped societal norms. 21st century. The digital age.